Hey friend, welcome back to Bible Tract Echoes. I'm Micah McCurry, your host. Thank you so very much for taking your time and joining me once again right here on the program. Today, we're going to conclude a message preached by a friend of mine, an assistant pastor from Indiana. His name is Zach Carman. He's a hometown boy at my home church. You know, I didn't grow up at my home church. My wife did. Her dad has been the pastor. He was a pastor for over 40 years at FBC Dwight, the First Baptist Church in Dwight, Illinois. And what a blessing to have a legacy of faithfulness. Well, Zach Carman, as a hometown boy, he grew up there along with the Carman family for many years, and he was invited back to speak at this 40th anniversary celebration that we had not long ago. And he did such a wonderful job. It stuck out to me to think about the legacy that my father-in-law, Pastor Dan Woodward, has shown, the lives he's impacted through God. What a blessing. But now we get to hear from a young man who's learned some lessons about how to find the treasure in the trials. You say, what? There's no treasure in trials. Well, Brother Zach Carman would beg to differ. He's been through a good bit over these past days, but God has lifted him up, has done amazing things through him and for him. What a great testimony he has. I'm going to ask you to tune in to listen to what God has for you. Maybe something that's said could be a blessing to you today. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you tune your heart, soft hearts, open ears, sharp minds. Listen to this message, the final installment of this message titled, When It Rains, It Pours.
If we go back to the book of Genesis, say we looked at Joseph in the trials, and now we're going to look at Joseph's treasure in the trials. And so when he was sold into slavery, say what happened there is we see in chapter 37 and verse 21. Genesis chapter 37, verse 21, it says, "And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, 'Let us not kill him.'" And so what his brothers wanted to do was kill him, but there's a little treasure in this trial that one brother said, let's not kill him. Well, let's not do that. And so there's a blessing there. If you go to chapter 39 and verse 2. Chapter 39 and verse 2, it says, in chapter 39, verse 2, "And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand." And then go down to verse 21 and 22. It says, "But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it." So we see in this chapter that even though he's been sold into slavery, he's been sold into Potiphar's house, God was with him and promoted him. God was with him and put him in a place of authority. And even when he was in prison, the keeper of the prison put him in a place of authority. And so we go to chapter 41, verse 8. Chapter 41, verse 8. And it says that it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream. But there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. So this is after Pharaoh's dreams, and it's troubled him to the point, it's troubled his spirit. And so he's looking for an answer. We go down to verse 16. This is right after the butler forgot him in chapter 40, verse 23. It says that Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." And so we see here that it wasn't just by happenstance that the butler forgot Joseph. You know, Joseph stood before Pharaoh at the right time. Joseph stood before Pharaoh at a time that Pharaoh needed some help. Pharaoh was troubled, and he got put before Pharaoh at a point where Pharaoh was looking for someone to help him and was willing to help the person that helped him. And so we move on to chapter 41 and verse 37. Verse 37, it says, "And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And the Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, For as much as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And so we see here that he's been promoted. Okay, he's been promoted by Pharaoh. He's been lifted up. And what amazes me in this passage is we see Pharaoh, an Egyptian, somebody who is probably most likely a heathen, doesn't believe in God. He looks at Joseph and says, I see God in him. And he begins to he talks about whom the Spirit of God is. You know, I want to be so filled with the Spirit of God that people in the world could tell that I'm filled with the Spirit of God. I want to be so Christian, or in other words, Christ-like, that people in the world have no question about it. That there's no doubt in their mind that when I'm around this guy, he is a Christian. You know, it's funny how sometimes you'll sit with people. I remember just a few weeks ago in the midst of all this, say I was driving to Bloomington to pick up some flowers for our church for Mother's Day. And my car started shaking real bad. And I said, oh no. I had a pretty good idea what it was, and so I thought, I'll just get to an auto parts store. Well, then it started shaking worse. And so I said, well, I'm not going to sit here and total my car. So I had it towed. I get in there, and the tow truck driver at first is just mad, and he said, well, it's a really busy day, and da-da-da-da-da. I'd already sent my wife. We had some family that lives in Bloomington, so they came and picked her up. And so he's in there and he's cussing and all these things. And so I hand him a tract and said, I'm the assistant pastor at Calvary Baptist Church in Linton. And he just froze. I've been cussing like a sailor. I'm so sorry. Da, da, da. But the important thing is that they know. That they know that there's something different about you. And so I gave him a tract. I witnessed to him. Thankful for the printing ministry that Brother Micah has. Had a tract that actually went pretty well with it. We designed it for a big diesel show that was in town. And so, it's good for that area. There's a lot of off-roading things in that area. And so, but wonderful opportunity to witness to him, even though, he started out by cussing and all these things. But we see here that Joseph's been blessed. If you look in chapter 50, you'll see that his brothers bow before him just as they did in his dreams. But most importantly, in chapter 50 and verse 19, and I'll be wrapping it up. Chapter 50, verse 19, it says, and Joseph said unto them, fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. In our lives, as I said, we can get so focused on the trials that we miss the treasure. We get so focused on what's going wrong, and this is something that I witnessed in Pastor Woodward's life multiple times, that there are hard things. There's going to be hard times. And I remember seeing Pastor Woodward in those hard times just keep on moving like nothing's happening. I remember times where, there was people that would hurt him about certain things, and I remember seeing him kind of brokenhearted about those things, but also he didn't forget about what God's done for him. He didn't sit there and wallow in the ashes. He got up and kept moving. He said, you know what, God's been good. And he would say, God is good all the time, and all the time God is good, and kept on moving. What a wonderful testimony. Last point tonight, and I'll be done, is treasure the treasures. Treasure the treasures. We get so focused, as I said, on the trials that we really forget what God's done for us. We look at everything that has happened and we begin to become so overwhelmed, and it's easy. Okay, I've been there. I've been there before, where I remember as a senior in high school, my dad getting cancer. Senior in high school, my mom getting cancer, almost within a month of each other. And I had just gotten saved that summer. At the youth conference that we're about to take children to, we're about to go to it as well as you all are. And as I reminisce for just a moment, it wouldn't be so if it wasn't for a pastor with the leadership that he has, and without Brother Austin. I was working in the mechanic shop at the time, and I told him there was no way I could do it. And he said, well, why don't you talk to your boss? I said, well, there's just no way. And he said, why don't you talk to your boss, or I'll give him a call. I said, okay, I'll talk to my boss. And so I talked to my boss, and I thought for sure, because I had just missed a week for a different camp, literally the week before. And I thought, there's no way. And so I asked him, he says, oh yeah, that's fine, you can go. And I thought, I didn't want to. But because of a youth pastor that cared about me enough, that loved me enough, and said, why don't you ask and see? And kind of pushed for me to ask and see. That's where I got saved. That summer, I got called to preach at football camp. That summer, I got right with God right down here at football camp. And so, boy, look at the blessings. It's so easy to get overwhelmed. It's so easy to look and say that there's no way out. I can't make it. I'm going to get buried underneath all of this. I mean, look at Joseph's life so far, 17 years old, and his brothers wanted to kill him, sell him into slavery, lied about, thrown in prison, forgotten about in prison. All this has happened as a young man. Boy, what a difficult thing to go through. But what he said is that God meant it all for good. You know, I'm so thankful that God meant it all for good. I'm so thankful in my life that through every single trial, that through every single heartache, that God meant everything for good. And I'm thankful for a pastor that taught me those things as a young boy. That I could look back and say, there's an example of somebody that did it. There's an example of someone that through the trials found the treasures and said, I'm going to look at that instead. It's such an important thing. It was a big help to me. I hope it's a blessing to you. But just remember, when the rains of life are coming your way, that God's blessing still pours out on you.
Friends, as we close out this week of broadcasts, what a blessing to hear from a young man that's been through a lot. As a young married man, Zach Carman is, with a family, with kids, but what grace he is showing through it all. If there's any part of this that has spoken to you, I'd love to hear from you. You can text me. I'd love to pass on a kind word to Zach. Text me at 309-316-7240. Again, that's 309-316-7240. If you missed any of the installments, you can find them on your favorite podcast player on demand. I want to thank you so much for tuning in once again. But as we go our separate ways for the weekend, of course, I'm sure you're going to come back for Bible Tract Echoes on Monday this coming week. I'm excited about what God has on the docket for us this coming week. But as we go our separate ways, I want you to ask yourself, I want you to think, am I as settled with God as I should be? Do I know that He knows where I am? Am I finding the treasure in the trials? Do I realize when it rains, I should pour? I should still be willing and able to be the salt of the earth. I pray that you can answer those questions the right way. I want to thank you so much for tuning in all this week. Thank you for giving an audience to my friend Zach Carman. It's a blessing to have this podium, to have this microphone, and then to share it just a little bit with some young men and some older men like Paul Levine, who have meant so much to me. My prayer, as always, is that you have a great day for His glory. We'll plan on talking to you soon. God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to Bible Tract Echoes, the radio ministry of Bible Tracts Incorporated. Want to see our gospel tracts and other resources? Visit us online at BibleTractsInc.org. That's BibleTractsInc.org. Or follow us on social media to learn how you can partner with this ministry. Thanks again for listening. May the Lord richly bless you as you live for Him.